Good morning.
Good morning, Gabrielle.
Natsuyo, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
And good morning to those who are joining us. We will get started soon. And thank you so much for being here.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Marcella.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I when I walked in, I heard Colombian music. Was that my phone or does
No,
anybody
that was
else?
my phone. It was my phone. You know what? I always have Latin music on the background as a work music.
Oh, very nice. And that's one of my favorite songs
Oh,
too. I'm
really?
like,
It was.
oh, that's why I thought he said, I'm like, oh my God, do I have my Spotify on? What's happening?
Yeah, I played it so that you can make a grand entrance.
Oh, that's so sweet. Good morning, Natsuyo. That's so sweet. Well, that'll be a perfect part of our conversation this morning as well. So, welcome to the Clubhouse room of Culture Shift team. And
Thank you.
our clubhouse is internal. You saw that we put some things on social media for sure.
Mhm.
However, the whole purpose of this room is for our team members to continue, all of us, right, to continue to expand our knowledge and our awareness in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and multicultural marketing and communications. And so this what you see, who you see in the room right now, are all members of Culture Shift team. And
Oh, okay,
so
great.
yes, and Gabrielle will be my co-host this morning, and my business partners, Robert Wilson, actually is in a training right now with one of our clients, and he could not move that around. So he's not here today. And then my other business partner, Ann Gillespie, was going to be here today, but she got called to jury duty. And
Oh,
so she has to go and see if she's going to be selected for actually,
great.
being part of
Yeah.
a trial. And I am saying hello from Palm Springs, Southern California. So it's 7 a.m. my time.
Oh my God, I didn't realize you were there. Oh,
Yes, I'm here on this part of the world for a few weeks. I came first to Vegas, now I'm in Palm Springs, and then I am going to Seattle, and then back to Phoenix until
oh,
about October 4th, and then I fly to Miami
wow.
for a couple of weeks.
Is it all for business?
The majority is the majority. I decided to take a 5 month digital nomad situation. So
Oh,
I left New
nice.
York. Yeah, I left New York August 26th. Came back for our NSA meeting in September, and then I'll come back for our November meeting, and then I won't be back until January again. So
Yeah,
that's the plan.
nice. I wish I have the luxury of doing that, but I have a almost 11-year-old girl and I
Yes,
still have to attend to her. I have to drive
yes.
her to her ice skating rink 4 times a week.
Oh my
You know that
goodness.
very well. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, let's get into it so that we can actually share with the team how I know you. And so, good morning, everyone at
Yeah.
Culture Shift team. I hope that some of you would like to come up to. I don't know what the words are in Clubhouse, but I hope that some of you will come up to the speaking platform and either share thoughts or ask some questions about our conversation. But today we have with us Natsuyo Lipschutz. I think I'm saying your last name correctly.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And how I know Natsuyo is that we met at the National Speakers Association New York City chapter. We met already more than a year ago, and at that moment, you all also know Jean Stafford. She was the president of the chapter in New York, and
Mhm.
when she talked to me about the chapter, she said one of the first things she said. I remember we were walking through Central Park, and she said, "You have to meet Natsuyo," and
Oh.
yeah, and I was very excited about that. And so Natsuyo was born in Japan, and she has worked for several years in the United States, helping people understand culture, which is also the base of all of our work at Culture Shift Team. So, Natsuyo, I want to start by asking you about your life in Japan. What
Mhm.
was your life in Japan before you moved to the United States, and then tell us why you moved to the United States.
Yeah, so well, I came to the US kind of accidentally. um, in early 1995, when I was a senior in college in Japan, I was introduced to the CEO of a large global company or Japanese company based in New York. And he was visiting Japan for business for a week. And he invited me to have breakfast with him. And we talked about my college and my 1 year exchange student experience in St. Louis, Missouri, my love for dancing and musical theaters. And at the end of our 1 hour breakfast, he asked me, "So, Natsuyo, where do you want to be when you graduate?" And, I didn't know where I wanted to be, but what came out of my mouth was, "Well, Mr. Che, you're in New York, so I want to go to New York." And then he said, "Okay, then you come work for my company." So that's how I
Oh,
landed
wow.
in New York. Yeah,
But he was Japanese, right, Natsuyo?
he was actually Korean,
Okay.
who was fluent in Japanese. So he was
Okay.
a CEO of the U.S. arm of the Japanese company.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
I had
let's
yeah,
let's 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 go back a second. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna say I had no idea it was a job interview. I thought I was just having a nice, breakfast with him.
You see, you never know. You never know what
I know.
conversations
Uh,
will take you. But
yeah.
okay. So you said that you spent an exchange year in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yes.
How old were you? And was it in high school? And how was that experience of that
Oh,
culture shock?
yes.
Because I'm sure you had it.
Yes. Well, I was junior in college at that time,
Okay.
so it was a exchange program with my college in Japan, and I always liked studying English, right? So I've been listening to this radio. I mean, if any of our listeners are youngsters, radio used to be from a tape recorder, cassette tape recorder thing, camcorder. I had to use a cassette tape to record the radio program. And there was this English conversation radio program that I was listening to every single day. So I really enjoyed English. So I thought, okay, I can get by. But when, as soon as I started my exchange program and got into a real college classes in America, oh boy, I could not. Well, first of all, I could not understand some colloquial English. Like someone would say, hey, what's up? And I was like, what's up, where, what? And,
Oh
and
my
I'm,
gosh,
I'm literally looking
Natsuya.
up. Yeah, looking
That
up and what am I missing?
Yes, that is exactly the same experience I had when I moved from Bogota, Colombia, to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1981. Just like you, I had learned proper English. I went to a bilingual school in Bogota, and the nun was a Catholic, so they were American nuns. And of course, my mother spoke English since
Mm,
she was little, and so we learned proper English. And then you go to these places like St. Louis or Charlotte, and
mm.
all the slang, I had
Oh
no
yeah.
idea what was happening.
Yeah, no one speaks like, "Oh, how are you doing? I'm very well, thank you."
No,
And you?
especially not in high school or college.
Oh no, no. Yeah, so
Okay.
that was a shock. I mean, my English, I wasn't speaking the real English, right? So that was a shock. And also, I come from Japan where it's a very formal type of culture, and especially in the classroom, teachers have power and authority, and you have to have a permission from the teacher to speak up, and you have to really behave, sit still. Um, as soon as a teacher comes into the classroom, you have to get up. Students all get up and bow and say "Ohayo gozaimasu," good morning, and then sit down, and then the class starts. Right. So I was used to that. So
I'm
in St.
laughing
Louis.
already. I'm laughing
Right.
because I Colombia is not that formal, but it's also very respectful and a little formal, not as much. And but oh my goodness, I remember also in Charlotte going. I was scared. Were you scared of the lack of respect that students had for the teachers? Because that scared me.
Well, I would say it was not. I mean, I wasn't scared per se, but it was like, oh my God, you know, what are these students doing? You know, the teacher's here now. You know, why are they chewing gum and why are they
Yes.
still chatting and and sitting in an improper way and they're eating sandwiches and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, this is different.
Wow, wow. Okay, so you stayed a year in St. Louis, and of
Yeah.
course, you also obviously from that you learn some slang, right? And other forms of English. What did
Hmm.
you when so you went back to Japan, what was the
Yep.
most enriching or yeah, enriching culture situation or culture cue that you took back with you?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think my 1 year in St. Louis was the very first foreign experience for me. So, you know, 1 year sounds like a long time, but you know, now I've been living in the US for 27 years. The one year was just a tiny fraction. So what I took out of the 1 year exchange program was basically um, the conversational English and also the fact that you need to take an initiative to start something if you want something. You can't just wait politely, just like I used to do in Japan. So you have to go out and ask for something.
That is so powerful, Natsuyo. That is so powerful because that is exactly, I'm so sorry that Anne is not here, but she will get to listen to the recording. But one of the things that we mentor Latino students in Nashville. You know, we lived there for many years. Anne and I did, and she started a program for Latino students who were entering college. And one of the things that she always told them was, you have to advocate for yourself.
Right.
In the United States, that is a must, right? That's actually expected as well.
Hmm.
And so, and I learned that from my mother growing up, but it's not something also that is part of our culture in
Right.
general, right? In Latin America.
Yeah.
So, did that then create culture shock for you in Japan as you started doing? Did you start doing that in Japan?
Well, you know, I did. So here's some funny episode. After 1 year, I went back to Japan, and the college I went to in St. Louis is Washington University in St. Louis, and they were pretty famous, well known for their MBA program. And I got to meet with some MBA students, and I was interested. So after I went back to Japan, I thought, okay, I have some questions about MBA, so I need to ask, right? So I picked up the phone and called up admissions office of Northwestern University in Chicago, and I spoke with them and said, I'm interested in your program. So how do I get in? And they said, do you have any work experience? I said, no, I'm a student still. And they said, okay, then have at least a few years of work experience and then come apply. And I was like, oh my God, there are some schools out there in the world that require you to work. And I'm like, wow, that's different. But, you know, thinking back, that was such a naive move that I would just call the admissions office and say, I'm interested. How do I get in?
Yeah.
So, so I started to use this um, you gotta you gotta ask questions attitude, but not in a proper way or not in a you know uh, the effective way. So I
Okay.
was still trying to balance what works and what doesn't. So 1 year didn't really quite give me that perfect balance yet.
Yes, yes, the full experience of being part of a culture and going through
Yeah.
the acculturation process. And
Right.
part of our team was just in Las Vegas. We attended a wonderful conference from the National Latino Behavioral Health Association,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a 2-day conference, and they shared a lot of information on clinical trials and studies that they're doing with immigrants who go through the acculturation process and the amount of stress that that causes,
Mm.
especially if they have children who they're raising here or are born
Yes.
here, and the
Mm-hmm.
children are obviously assimilated, and you
Mm.
are not. So so we'll skip around a little bit here. So first of all, Pilar and I, who Pilar is on the call here, we're both acculturated. So we were both born and raised in Colombia. And we, after this conference, we looked at each other, we thought, we've never really given it any thought or time to understand the stresses that we have gone, the stress that we have gone through by the process of acculturation. And she and
Mm.
I also raised our children here, were born here, raised here. And so I do remember telling Esteban when he was about 12 or 13 years old, going, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you're the blood that runs through your veins is Colombian.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. That's what I'm telling my daughter too. You're half Japanese. Yeah.
So
And
what does
yeah.
that mean to you when you tell her, what are you actually saying to her when you say that?
Well, I really want her to have a nice balance of Japanese values and, well, my husband is Jewish, so Jewish values. And about a couple years ago, I think, when she was still 8 or 9, she started to feel, I could tell that she started to feel that being Japanese is not so cool.
Yeah.
And there was some essay homework at school, or it wasn't an essay, it was a poem she had to write about herself. And she wrote something like, I am Jewish. I I enjoy Jewish culture, Jewish food, and blah blah blah. But I'm also I'm proud to be Jewish, but I'm also Japanese, or am I? So that was her poem. And I said, "Oh, I'm giving her so many Japanese things and experiences, and the food I cook every day is Japanese, and I take her to Japan every year, and we only speak in Japanese with each other." And she was going to Japanese school. She still is. And she's doing so much more Japanese things than Jewish things. So I was surprised to see that poem, and I said, "Oh, so what about the Japanese part?" And she goes, "Well, you know, my Jewish friends at school are cool." I took it personally.
I am too. I'm sitting here
Yeah,
taking it personally. She's not my
yeah,
child.
I know. Yeah, I was like,
Wow.
okay, wow. I'm 100% Japanese, born and raised.
Yeah.
And she has half of my blood and DNA, but she has her own identity. So she has to figure out the balance. But for her to figure out the balance, she first has to understand the values of both cultures and not know, it's not that one culture is cruel or better than the other. It's just some differences. So how do you deal with differences, and how to understand the differences and embrace the differences is really the key for successful cross-cultural, you know,
Life.
heritage or
Yes.
life. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So interesting. So obviously that causes stress, right? Just that moment of understanding, or I think you did very well in understanding this is painful to me, but however, my daughter needs to find her own
Yeah.
identity, and giving her the space to get to that point, right? I think we
Hmm.
we we, we all who have raised children in another culture want them to, for the most part, I feel like we would like them to know our culture of origin and giving them that space to do so.
Mm,
All right,
yeah.
I know that hopefully Gabrielle will share some of her story as well. If I know I'm putting you on the spot, Gabrielle, but you're used to it. I do this all the time.
Do you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go
I
ahead,
love it.
Gabby.
No, it's fascinating to hear the story of your daughter Natsuyo, because I'm half Colombian as well, and or not as well, but
Mm,
I'm half American, half Colombian, and that definitely I I finally know now that I'm older. I'm like, oh, I do have like this multicultural home that's very unique, and I would have these experiences growing up where kids would say things to me or say you're not Colombian or you are, or um, just so many different instances where I had to. I didn't really process it until I was older. Like, oh wow, my family is really unique, but
mm,
thankfully we're in a time now that I feel like we're starting to embrace that in this country, and embracing the multicultural life, and I see that it's more prevalent now. I meet more people that are like, oh yeah, I'm half this and half that, and
mm,
this is my family dynamic, and so I'm excited for the future in this country as that keeps happening more. But yeah, it's just fascinating to hear your story, because I could totally relate with your daughter as far as trying to not only
mm,
understand what it means to be an American, but understand what that means as a half Colombian. And then I also find that I have sort of this allyship mentality now, where I want to help bridge that gap, and I want to
mm,
understand more of what that cross cultural communication is. So that's why I'm so happy that you're here with us this morning, and I look forward to hearing more about your advice on that and what that
Yes.
looks like.
That's an excellent segue to your work, Natsuyo, right? Just
mhm,
like we do at Culture Shift Team, we every day our work is either helping clients be, have another perspective, to see things from another angle, be vulnerable, be compassionate, be empathetic, all the, on the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and education side, and on the multicultural side, like Gabrielle just said, is understanding how to, helping clients communicate to different cultures, different languages, different target audiences, etc. But let's go to where you decided to take your own experience, your own personal life, your own personal journey, and say, this is what I want to do, for as a profession. When did
mhm.
that happen, and how did that happen?
Okay, so there are some multiple incidents that led me to start my business, but let me take you back to 2005, a little while ago. But that was soon after I started my own strategy consulting firm here in New York. And I was hired by this Japanese guy, Mr. K, a 65-year-old retired government official who's now the chairman of this 4-century-old Japanese craft company. And Mr. K had his strategy all laid out, but he wanted to make sure that his strategy is going to work in the US. So one day he called me over and said to me, "You're hired." And by that time, I had been in the US for 10 years already, and I became American enough to understand how things work over here, yet Japanese enough to understand how things work over there. But little did I know that I still needed to learn how to bridge our differences, even between a Japanese and a Japanese, right? So this is what happened. As soon as Mr. K hired me, I conducted an extensive research and analysis, as I always do as a strategy consultant. And then I said to myself, uh oh, his strategy is not going to work. And I have to tell him that. How do I communicate? But, well, if I explain the new strategy in details, he'll understand. He hired me after all, right? So, no problem. Problem.
Every time you say no problem, something's gonna happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what I did was I put together a very detailed presentation explaining why his strategy is not going to work and why mine would. And that was
Yeah.
very logical. No room for argument. It was a masterpiece. I was so confident that Mr. K would thank me for hiring me. And I attached my masterpiece presentation in email, put Mr. K in the recipients field, and CC'd everybody. The next day,
Mm.
I received the shortest email from Mr. K. Just 2 words: call me.
Oh wow.
And I said 2 words to myself: oh, yeah, he loves
Mm.
my presentation. So I called him right away. Then he gave me another 2 words: come
Oh
today.
my gosh, that sounds like a scary movie.
Yep, I know. Dun, 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 right? And well, so if you came with me later that day, you would have heard Mr. K sitting behind his antique desk while I'm trying to create a movie scene. The leather a chair he was sitting on, and his voice cuts through the air. Who do you think you are? And I said, I'm your
Wow.
consultant. You hired me. Who do you think you are? In my head.
Okay, okay.
But instead, I said, well, Mr. K, it seems like you need more clarification. So let me explain. According to my research, and then he gave me 2 more words that I never forget: you're fired.
Wow.
So in just a few months, I went from you're hired
To
to
you
you fired.
fired. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, well, there was a long period that I had to figure out what went wrong and what had to be done. But just like the number one challenge that often stands between you in general, you and your culturally diverse audience, is common sense, right?
Hmm.
So over the years, we built up our own layers of assumptions, and
Hmm.
our values could be influenced by your family and friends, colleagues, or the society you live in. And you start to look at your world as if you're wearing some multiple layers of glasses on top of each other.
Hmm.
So your view is skewed, but you don't realize that you're wearing those layers, and that becomes your common sense. So what happened in my case with Mr. K was I assumed that if I what he hired me as a consultant and strategy consultant, he's paying me to do the job, and I did my job. So he would understand if I explain everything logically. Um, but his assumption was that I'm a Japanese female who's hired by him, which creates a little hierarchy. So, and he was really confident in his strategy. So what he actually wanted was a validation that his strategy is going to work, and he wanted to back it up by my research. But I did completely different and complete opposite. And I was so clear and logic and open with my communication about why his strategy is wrong. Well, I didn't use the word wrong, but why this is not the right choice, and this is the direction we should be heading. He felt like he was betrayed by me,
Oh wow.
um, because the common sense or the assumption there was, oh, she would support my strategy. Natsuyo would
Hmm.
definitely research the market and support my strategy, so she will help me to move forward with my strategy.
Hmm.
And probably because he comes from a bureaucratic background, maybe he had this assumption that young female, back then I was in early 30s, um,
Hmm.
young female would not be so eloquent about
Mm. Yeah.
the opposing idea.
And
So
have your own opinion.
yes, even though he hired me.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? But
Yeah.
that is part of the culture, right? For him, yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually confused as well because, like you said, you hired me, to give you the best advice, but he
Yeah.
got offended when you actually did.
Right. So it was the communication. It was not the strategy I proposed. It was how I communicated.
Okay.
You know, I look back at that strategy I developed, and it's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's how I communicated. So that's when I mean, it took me a long time, but I discovered or I developed the three-step process of effective cross-cultural communication process, and
Okay.
I call it the three A's. And the first A is acknowledge. So, um, if you think about a huge iceberg, you can only see the tip of the iceberg, but the huge part is hidden under the surface. But that huge part is supporting the tip of the iceberg, right? So that sort of explains what happened between me and Mr. K. So Mr. K kept giving me two words, right? You're hired, call me, come today, you're fired. And these are what I heard. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. And I was completely misconstrued what I thought. Why? Because I didn't understand there was more hiding under that iceberg.
Okay.
So Mr. K was thinking about all kinds of things. Like, you're hired because I need you to reassure to my team that my strategy is correct. And call me and come today because we need to talk privately about what you did wrong.
Yeah.
And you're fired. Well, I got that message, but
Yeah.
he was he was probably thinking, well, you embarrassed me in front of my team. You don't know your place. You're disrespectful. You're fired.
Okay.
So that's the why. The rest of the
Yeah.
iceberg hiding under the surface.
Wow. So wow, so many things to unpack there, but when he said you disrespected me, it immediately took me back to your college experience. You're sitting there, the
Mm,
teacher comes in and everybody's doing something else, which is not what you would do in Japan. And your
right.
response, I remember my response. It really scared me. The level of disrespect really scared me.
Mm.
Even the people using flip flops in school, I'm like, how can you
Oh
come in
yeah.
flip flops?
Oh
You know,
yeah.
oh my God, it's so rude. And then in Nashville, when I moved to Nashville, people were going to church in flip flops, and I thought, oh no, I can't handle this. But anyway, so okay, so let's go back to that moment when he says you're fired and you understand why.
Yeah.
Walk us through your mental process at that moment, and what have you changed or adjusted, or have you changed or adjusted anything since then?
Yeah. Well, not at that very moment, but since then, it's been how many years? It was 2005, so many years, 17 years, right? So it changed my perception in a way that I need to follow this three-step process that I talked about. I only introduced the first A so far, but I need that the key is to really first acknowledge, that's the first A, acknowledge that their why that's hiding under the surface of the iceberg, their why may be different than mine. So acknowledging the difference um, is the first step because we often tend to apply our own why to analyze or to judge the what you see or hear. And that's where the miscommunication and mistrust happen. So the first step of the A is to acknowledge. And then once you acknowledge the difference, then the second step is to analyze. And since that time, I learned something called high context and low context model. And it is this model was developed by Edward Hall. Maybe if you're in cross culture, maybe you know. Just quickly, the high context culture. In a high context culture, people rely on context. So it's not necessary or even inappropriate to spell everything out too explicitly. In a low context culture, on the other hand, they rely on verbal messages, and there is no room for inferences. So they are more explicit, logical, and direct. So now, when I think back to this incident with Mr. K, he kept giving me two words, and his communication style heavily relied on context, which makes him very high context, right? And there was a huge room for interpretation. But if you share the same context, high context communication would work quite efficiently because you don't have to say much and they'll understand you. But
Okay.
I added my own interpretation, used my own assumptions, wrong ones, and thought he couldn't wait to hear more about my strategy. So I was very low context. I took his words at the face value. And I communicated my strategy in such details against Mr. K's plan. I spelled everything out clearly, explicitly, and logically. On top of that, I CC'd everybody to be super transparent.
Oh my God.
I treated, everyone is equal. I treated
Yeah.
them equally and no hierarchy. Very,
Yes.
very, very low context. So now you understand why I got fired from Mr. K.
Yeah.
So my low context communication was so rude from his high context point of view.
Yes.
Yeah. So
You
I
know,
understand that now.
yes, wonderful. And so, we have a this is so fascinating. We have a Anne, who unfortunately cannot be here today. Many years ago, was hired by Southwest Airlines to do a cross-cultural, multicultural training. And they really didn't know what they really needed. But what had happened at the time was that Southwest had bought AirTran Airlines, which was
Mm,
a small airline. And that airline had routes to Puerto Rico, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and to Mexico City. And so this is the first time Southwest as a company was going outside the United States. And
mm,
Southwest is one of the most egalitarian airlines in the United
yeah.
States, right? And they still
Hmm.
had to, because it's interesting to me, and I would love to have this conversation with you later on about the United States believing that they're egalitarian when they're really not as
Mm,
egalitarian as they think they are. And so they were having a lot of conflict with Puerto Rican passengers coming out of their own land and Mexican passengers coming out of their own land. Because once we're in the US, then we all sort of had to adapt to the culture of Southwest in the US. But now Southwest was going to them, to their territory, to their own
mm,
culture, and they were not acting the same way. So Anne came in and put together something that we now own as a trademark, which is called the multicultural lens. And you
mm,
said it at the beginning. It's like you have all these lenses that you have
yeah.
on that becomes common sense. But I'm sure you have learned that there's no such thing as common sense,
Right.
equally to everyone. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that this multicultural lens is seven. It discusses seven aspects of culture, and one of them is communication. And
Mm,
what you touched on is exactly right. Is where are the gaps in communication when someone communicates directly or when someone communicates indirectly?
yeah.
And so you just explained that so wonderful because it is exactly right.
Right.
I am, I think, well, my team will correct me if I'm lying here, but I am a baby boomer. I'm a baby boomer. I am more hierarchical than probably anyone else of the three partners. And so, but I try to be a little bit more flexible. But however, when I've been invited to weddings from millennials and Gen Zers with a text message, and I'm like, what?
Wow. Not a paper invitation.
Nothing,
You
not
have to
not
put.
even an email, a
Oh
text
my God.
message.
You have to put the card, nice card in the envelope and put it in the mailbox.
Exactly. And so those things to me, I'm like, why am I being invited with a text
Wow.
message? But it is what it is. And sometimes it's even hard for us as communicators as well and multicultural
Mhm.
marketers to go, for example, my team has heard me say that I don't like the word Latinx to put as Latinos in a
Mm,
box.
mm,
However, we have to adapt, adjust, and be flexible.
mhm.
All right, we have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure that if anyone from our team has a comment or a question or any story, personal story that relates to Natsuyo, please raise your hand so we can bring you up here. All right, Natsuyo. So let's keep talking. So, how did you continue to establish your business, not only as a consultant, but also as a
Mhm.
speaker in New York City?
Hmm, that's really interesting. So, um, if I may go back a little bit to my three-step process, I only introduced two: acknowledge, analyze, and the last step is actually what you said, Marcella, adapt, right? So the, how to adapt is very different depending on the situation, whether you're speaking one-on-one or presenting to a culturally diverse audience or facilitating discussions in a diverse group. There are different techniques to adapt. So as a consultant or communication consultant, I had to address all occasions. So speaking one-on-one would require active listening skills and good questioning techniques. And if you're presenting to a group of diverse audience, of course, you need to have a public speaking skills, and facilitation skills is something different when you are a leader of a diverse team and you want to maximize the productivity of that group and bring out every single person's strength and put them together and move the conflicts toward con- the what's the word I'm looking for, consensus, right? So those are a different technique. So I started to work with some organizational development company in Japan. They had some contents, and I got training with them, and I started to train their clients on facilitation skills and active listening skills and questioning techniques. And over the time, uh, I taught myself. I took courses. I got certified in public speaking, coaching, the certification, and ultimately, I had to walk the talk. So I decided that I want to be a speaker, and that becoming a professional speaker had two um, there were two main causes. One was my experience in Toastmasters. If you don't know Toastmasters, it's a worldwide speed public speaking learning group, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and they have contests, international speech contests every year. So I joined Toastmasters and competed in speech contests, and I was doing well. And then I started to feel confident, and I started to enjoy speaking in front of the audience because it's I used to think that speaking in front of the audience is just one directional, one-sided speaking like communication method, but it's totally not. It's definitely a two-way conversation. You bounce back um, what you what emotion you receive from your audience, and it's bouncing back and forth and back and forth, and that was a dynamic process, and I started to enjoy that. So that's one. And two, second um, reason that I decided to become a professional speaker is 5 years ago I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I heard that news, two things came up to my mind. First, my then 5 year old daughter. I didn't want to scare her. I had to stand strong, and I can't show my weakness, and I have to be positive. And second, what that turned out to be wrong. I had to be vulnerable and be transparent so that I don't I don't stress out from all kinds of negativity. But that came afterwards. And the second thing that came up to my mind was this is going to be a great storytelling, great topics to talk about. And then I thought there was, there was another me overlooking myself from, up there, and I was surprised, like, oh, wow, I think that way. I I'm taking this breast cancer as an opportunity to talk about my stuff,
Wow.
and then that made me realize that I want to tell my stories. I want to share some stories that might inspire, even if just one person. And since I started to enjoy speaking, and I had this motivation or inspiration to share my stories, I also wanted to share my passion for speaking with others so that they can communicate their stories effectively,
Wow.
even if their first language is not English.
Wow. So good. Anyone has any questions or comments? Gabby?
Thank you so much, Natsuyo, for sharing, and especially about going through your cancer journey on top of this. I think your story is incredible and eye opening. And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about some questions about. I know that you shared a little bit about your, you know, Mr. Mr.
Okay.
K. Thank you, with Mr.
Mm-hmm.
K, and that kind of cross cultural communication that became quite challenging. But what about for, or what advice or words might you share for those of us internally? We're growing as a team, we're becoming more diverse, and as we grow together, we know that, you know, those cross cultural challenges may arise. And
Mm-hmm.
do you have any advice for us on how to approach that? I know that you have the three A's: acknowledge, analyze, and
Mm-hmm.
adapt. Are there some other practical steps that we can take when we come into a miscommunication like that
Yeah,
internally?
yeah, yeah. Thank you for the question. Definitely. Well, I would say one thing: ask questions, and ask good questions. Um, you hear that there's no stupid questions. Maybe there's no stupid questions, but there are good questions, bad questions, light questions, and heavy questions. And I
Okay.
talk about this in my training, but good questions are something that the other person is willing to answer, and it provides insights. And
Okay.
good questions uncover what's hiding under the surface, and it really brings out not just hidden information but quality information, because it gets the other person thinking about this question, and it also helps you to determine what to adapt in your communication without sacrificing your values and beliefs and your relationship and the group harmony. So, how do you craft good questions? Well, you need to take my course, but but
Very
asking
good.
a good question is a key. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful.
So interesting and so good, Natsuyo. I knew this conversation was going to be amazing and eye-opening, and and a teaching moment for all of us. And I really appreciate Gabby's question, because this is why we have this clubhouse, for us to continue to train ourselves as a team. You know how it is when you're focused on clients almost 100%, and we want to
Mhm.
take these opportunities for our team for all of us to grow and develop and be
Yeah.
educated, and also to have the opportunity to go, we're not perfect, right?
Hmm.
We're vulnerable, we're
Right.
still learning, we could be doing things wrong internally, so we're putting a lot of things in place, to grow as a team. As Gabby said, we started the business almost 5 years ago with the three of us who started the business,
Hmm.
and now I think we're going to be up to 15 or 16 people pretty soon. And
Wow.
so that's a little scary sometimes also, right? It's like we want to make
Yeah.
sure everyone feels
Yeah.
that everyone feels included and as a part of us. So
Yeah. Well, as someone said, you gotta do something that scares you to
Yeah.
grow, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Any other questions or comments, team? All right. I
They're
think,
being very high context.
yes, very high context. There you go.
Yes, you
Yes.
can put
Go
it in
ahead.
the chat too. If you don't feel comfortable coming to the stage, you can go ahead and write it in the chat pod as well, and I can read it. And if we want to give them a couple of minutes,
I
I know
think we're
that our
good.
okay. I know our
Yeah,
team, we like to process information.
I
We
know.
we think so hard sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you so much, Natsuyo. We really appreciate your time and the
Thank
conversation.
you.
This was amazing, and we will reach out to you again, maybe early next year, to see if there's anything else that we can do and collaborate. You know, we always
Yeah.
love working and collaborating with experts like you. So I definitely will share the recording with Robert and Anne, but would love for you to meet the two of them. And yesterday
Oh,
here in
great.
Palm Springs, Anne and I had lunch with Stephanie Battaglino. Remember? I can't remember. I can't ever
Yes,
pronounce
yes.
her last
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Hold on.
yeah.
Battaglino. Yes, that's correct. So we had a
Oh,
wonderful lunch
wow.
here. Yeah, I'll share the photo on the NSA Instagram page. It
Yeah.
was it was really
Oh,
lovely.
nice.
Yeah. Okay, Natsuyo, thank you so much. Everyone,
Thank you.
we have Catherine who just wrote, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us.
Well, thank you
Yes,
for having
yeah,
me. And
yeah.
I think we need a outro music.
Yeah, there you
Yes.
go. Go for it. Go for it. Go. Well, you're definitely speaking the language of all of the Latinos here in the team.
Yeah, yeah. The Latin music really like naturally moves my body. I mean,
Yes.
it's
That's
funny that
amazing.
when I'm in a restaurant, I don't really hear other music, but when the Latin music turns on, I'm like, oh, that's cha-cha. Oh, that's rumba.
And and we
Anyways,
didn't we didn't have a lot of time. Your life is so interesting, but I do want to mention that Natsuyo is an award-winning Latin ballroom dancer.
Wow.
Yes, yes. And
Incredible.
so yeah, perhaps there's a video somewhere that Natsuyo can share with us, because I would love to watch her dance.
I have to really dig through my DVDs or even I don't know VHS. I don't know.
Oh my God. Okay, we'll leave it there. And if you ever dance again or compete, just let us know.
All right.
All right, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Natsuyo, again.
Well,
Everyone,
thank
have a good
you.
day.
Thank you
Have a
so
good
much,
day.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.